Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson. I'm Cindy Lee. I've been a member of UUFC since 1991, and I'm also the mother of today's guest speaker, the Reverend Eve Stevens, and your worship associate for today. We have several announcements. I encourage you to look at the weekly connection for details about the events and announcements. If you do not yet receive the weekly connection, you can call 864-654-5959, and our administrator will help you sign up for the newsletter. You can also email her at admin@uufc.org, or you can visit our website and sign up for the newsletter there. The Reverend Christina Branum-Martin is our interim minister, but as I said, we have a guest speaker today, the Reverend Eve Stevens. So I wanted to bring your attention to several announcements. One is that on September 27th, we have the virtual Congregational member meeting that I encourage you to attend. It starts at 12 noon. We also now have an electronic photo directory that you can access through the weekly connection or through our website. If you need the password to access the directory, you can contact our administrator at admin@uufc.org. So we have an adult faith exploration online class that begins on September 14th and will go for the next 5 Mondays after the 14th. It's called the Guru on the Mountain book discussion, and it looks very interesting. So I encourage you to look that up in the weekly connection. Our benevolence for this month is the Clemson Child Development Center. UUFC has been a long supporter of the Child Development Center, and I would encourage you to donate to the center. You can also help support the Clemson Community Care Food Bank. Our congregation has long supported them through our donations. You can pull right into their parking lot, give them a call, their phone number's on their sign, and they'll come out to the car and pick up your donation. So it's important at this time to keep them well stocked. So the Black Lives Matter Lunch and Learn and Happy Hour is coming your way. The lunch is on Monday, September 14th from 11 to 12:30. And it will consider a recent New Yorker article called How Black Lives Matter is Changing the Church. So I encourage you to either attend the lunch on September 14th, that starts at 11, or the happy hour on September 16th that starts at 5:30. And you can contact Kathy Crane for that. So we have several events coming up. Our usual bingo night is on Thursday at 6:30. So you can contact either Karen Sanders or find the connection on the weekly connection newsletter. So we have a social time after the service today that will start at 11:30. So please feel free to join that. You can either connect through the email that was sent with the connection for this service today, or you can find the connection through the newsletter also. I want to remind you that there's another adult faith exploration online class that begins on October 13th and will go for another 4 Tuesdays after that. It's Building Your Own Theology, Part 1, and it's with the Reverend Christina Branum-Martin and Holly Ulbrich, and I can promise you that will be a very interesting class. Don't forget, you can sign up too to join one of our online covenant groups for some small group ministry. So you can find more information about that also in the weekly connection, or by contacting Karen Hebel at the diff@uufc.org. So that's all the announcements I have for you. And please do join one of our classes, play bingo, go to the Black Lives Matter lunch and learn, and enjoy today's service with Eve. So I got to have her under my roof for 16 years before she went off to the Governor's School for Arts and Humanities, and then to Hamilton College, and then to Union Seminary. She's just up the road in Charlotte, where she's one of the ministers at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. So enjoy and have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson. Whether you're tuning in for the first time or have been with us every week, so glad you are spending part of your morning here with us. I'm Eve Stevens, and I am a guest in your virtual pulpit this morning, filling in for the Reverend Christina Branum-Martin. I currently serve as one of the ministers of the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte, North Carolina, but this fellowship is my home congregation, and it's always wonderful to be home with you. We light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with the affirmation of this congregation. We gather together in a spirit of love, with justice as our guide. This is our chosen covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another. Though I'm going to put it off to the side here, you can trust that our chalice will be burning bright. This morning, we set off in search of courage together. It's a familiar idea that you've likely heard before, that you cannot have courage without fear. Or rather, courage is the result of facing our fears with heart. Instead of running from it, if I rise to meet my fear, reflecting more deeply on what I'm afraid of and why, I find that fear helps me see more clearly what I'm willing to fight for. In the midst of our encounter, fear has the power to renew our commitment to what matters most. Today we'll consider fear as a teacher and a guide, a source of spiritual renewal that invites us to respond with heart. Welcome all.
Spirit of life. come to me.
And now a moment for our children and those of you feeling most in touch with your inner child this morning. I'm a grown-up. I have to convince myself of this most days, but I am an adult. And yet at night, when I have to make sure all the lights are off before I go to bed, I still do the same thing I did when I was a kid. I move as quickly as I can to find the light switch, turn them all off one after the other, and then when it's all dark, I start to get this prickly feeling in my upper back. My shoulders rise a bit and my chest gets tight. I get that feeling like my back wants to move faster than my front to get me somewhere safe, fast, into a well-lit room, and yet under the covers, preferably. Covers are the most effective protection. Everyone knows it, nobody knows why, but we know it. But I always wonder, what would happen if when I'm feeling this fear and running from the dark living room back to my bedroom, what would I see if I stopped and I turned around? Well, I know enough now, in my adult way, that there aren't any monsters, there aren't any wolves, there aren't even any ghosts chasing me. So what would I see if I turned around? Maybe I'd see my fear. Maybe if I turned around before I get under my covers, I'd see my fear. What would it look like, I wonder? I'm guessing that it depends on the night. Let's say I came face to face with my fear of looking like a fool. My fear of looking like a fool might look something like this. Scary at first, until you look closer and realize, this beast is more funny than scary. Maybe if I came face to face with my fear of looking like a fool, maybe I'd try to act as foolish as possible to show my fear. Really, looking like a fool's not so bad. Yada-da-dee, yada-da-do, yada-da-dee. If I turn around and see my fear of failure, I might have to growl and hiss and fight it, staying brave until it turns and runs off. But what if I turn around and come face to face with my fear of losing someone I love? That's a kind of fear that we can't laugh away. My fear of losing someone I love might look like a lion with big, strong, sharp teeth and claws. The kind of fear that squeezes my chest and makes it hard to breathe, hard to know if I should try to run or just sit and cry. But maybe even though it's scary, if I get close to that fear, until I'm close enough to touch it, give it some attention, I could rub the head of that lion and scratch under its chin until it calms down. And when it's calmer, that fear might look a little more like this and say to me, all I really want is for you to write a letter or send a text to your loved one If they're in your house, all I want is for you to go and hug that loved one you're afraid of losing, even if it's 3 a.m. All I want is for you to pull the people you love close and enjoy the time you have with them. If I send that text saying, I love you, out of the blue, for no reason, maybe my fear of losing someone I love will retract its claws and settle down a little. So how about this? Kids, adults, everyone in between. What if tonight, when you turn off the light and you feel that little charge of fear chasing you into your room, take a deep breath and turn around. If we all know we're doing it together, maybe we'll feel braver. Tonight, when you turn off the lights and head to bed, turn around, plant yourself firmly where you stand, summon the courage to get a little closer to your fear so you can better understand what it's trying to tell you. Then snuggle in under the safety of those covers and get some rest. Richard Feynman was a physicist and for a time a physics professor at Caltech. Feynman loved giving his students a very creative and challenging first assignment. At the beginning of the semester, the first class, he'd ask them to respond to the following prompt. If, in a sudden cataclysm, the whole of knowledge is to be destroyed, and only one sentence is to be passed on to the next generation of creatures, what would you say to convey the most amount of information in the least amount of words? If all knowledge were destroyed, but you could leave behind one sentence to help the next generation, what would you say? For a recent episode of the podcast Radio Lab, producers Jad Abumrad and Rachel Cusick called dozens of creative people, scientists, artists, chefs, philosophers, musicians, and asked them to answer Richard Feynman's question. They got to explain their answers more than they would have after a cataclysm, but they still had to whittle their thoughts down to an initial single sentence. As I listened to that podcast, I was amazed how many of those one sentence answers had to do with fear and the powerful response that fear awakens in us. Caitlin Doty's single sentence was perhaps not surprisingly, since she's both a writer and a mortician. You need to know that you will die. Doty elaborated, you see, trying to wade through your fear of death will result in you needing to create. You'll have to transcend, you'll have to have religion, you'll have to have communities, you'll have to have art. Your response to this ultimate fear will be to live a meaningful life with the time you've got. Musician Esperanza Spalding responded by first talking about the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. In a rapid, excited voice, Spalding explained that the first thing that happened, all the animals who had not been subjected to any threats, who were on top of the food chain, who had grown complacent, all of a sudden, they all became more alert and more responsive, and they stopped grazing constantly in the exact same spot along the river. They had to move more because now there was this threat of wolves. So what happened is they start grazing higher up in the hills where they're less likely to be picked off than in the low grasslands. So the banks of the riverbed get firmer which means the flow of the river gets stronger, which means beavers can come in and start to build their dams. Also, because the game is not grazing in the same area constantly, trees that used to get chewed up in their early sapling stages start growing and songbirds return. All these species of birds return to Yellowstone that had been absent because they didn't have the right canopy cover. So, Spalding explains that if all knowledge were destroyed, and she could only leave one sentence for future humans who would arrive with knowing nothing, her sentence would be, cultivate the willingness to respond creatively to fear without trying to eradicate the source of the fear. Perhaps fear was woven into so many of the one-sentence responses to Feynman's questions because our response to fear determines whether and how we stay alive, both physically and spiritually. In 1984, the searingly honest and insightful writer and activist Audre Lorde received a chilling invitation to respond to her own source of fear. Just shy of her 50th birthday, Lorde was diagnosed with liver cancer. She refused treatment and decided she would go on living by sheer force of determination as long as she could. That year, Lorde wrote often about fear in her journal. I want to write down everything I know about being afraid, she wrote, but I'd probably never have enough time to write anything else. Dear Goddess, do not let me die a coward. At the time, Lorde was deeply in love with and committed to her work. She was in the midst of a thriving career with a successful book and invitations to speak internationally in her intimate and unwavering style about the joys and injustices she experienced as a Black gay woman in the United States. She knew that what she had to say was life-giving, especially for women of color around the world, pushed to the margins of societies. Lorde wrote, I want desperately to live, and I'm ready to fight for that living, even if I die shortly. Just writing those words down snaps everything I want to do into neon clarity. Elsewhere in her journal, Lorde writes out explicitly her plan for facing her ever-present fear of it all ending. I want to live the rest of my life, however long or short, with as much sweetness as I can decently manage, loving all the people I love and doing as much as I can of the work I still have to do. I'm going to write fire until it comes out of my ears, my eyes, my nose holes, until it's every breath I breathe. There's a poem by the Irish thinker and writer, the late John O'Donoghue, called Morning Offering. In the last stanza, he echoes Lorde's passion in his own way, saying, may I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more. Richard Feynman asked, if in a sudden cataclysm, the whole of knowledge is to be destroyed and only one sentence is to be passed on to the next generation of sentient creatures, what would you say to convey the most amount of information in the least amount of words? So many creative minds answered that knowledge of fear is the best companion for future beings, the strongest assurance of keeping them alive both physically and spiritually. because in the process of responding to fear with heart, we renew our commitment to what we hold most dear. We realize again what we're willing to fight for, what makes life worth living. Whatever else comes our way in the vast future of the unknown, if we can respond to fear with heart, with the core of who we are, with that inner energy that seeks our life's purpose, we'll discover again and again the courage required to do the work we're called to do and live the lives that we would love. What more could we wish for ourselves or for those who follow? I invite you now to join me in meditation, feeling how Earth's gravity pulls you toward Earth's center. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your body in your chair. And deepen your breath. Taking your breath deep into your belly before releasing it. Feel a new energy of new oxygen entering your bloodstream. And as you breathe deeply, take in these words by John O'Donohue from his blessing, A Morning Offering. I bless the night that nourished my heart to set the ghosts of longing free into the flow and figure of dream that went to harvest from the dark, bread for the hunger no one sees. All that is eternal in me, welcome the wonder of this day, the field of brightness it creates, offering time for each thing to arise and illuminate. I place on the altar of dawn the quiet loyalty of breath, the tent of thought where I shelter, waves of desire I am sure to, and all the beauty drawn to the eye. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shell of yesterdays, to risk being disturbed and changed. May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more. Blessed be, and amen. When fear greets us unexpectedly or as an old familiar presence, may we rise to meet it with heart and claim the life that we love. I am sending love to each of you. May hope abide with us until we meet again. Be well.